Hello and welcome to another episode of Currently Speaking, the podcast of the Current Consulting Group. I'm Bill Current, founder of the Current Consulting Group, and we are joined today again by Jessica Graham. And some of you may remember the episode that we did last year around the August timeframe with Jessica. And Jessica's had some really interesting experiences with drug testing in the criminal justice and government markets. We're going to talk about that today. But there have been some really exciting developments in Jessica's career. Jessica, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what you've been doing for the last 20 years and this new development?
Sure. So for next week would actually have been 21 years that I was in adult probation. So I spent here in Texas. I spent my last 7 as a supervisor, and then prior to that, I was an auditor and also a certified officer. So I've been in the drug testing field for almost 21 years, of course, on the forensic side of that. And just last Monday, actually, was my first day with Wondfo USA. And I was hired on as the product specialist for the SAFElife hair test and hair
Wow,
processor.
that's a big move.
A very big move, a great move, an exciting move. So I'm excited to learn more in this industry. And I believe in the hair test so much that I made this big jump.
Well, congratulations. That's wonderful. Wondfo is a great company to work for.
Absolutely.
Today, we're going to talk about drug test cheating, so our audience knows that. But before we launch into some of the specifics of that, over the course of your nearly 21 years in adult probation and parole, what kind of drug testing methods have you used? What's your experience?
So, of course, from day one, urine testing was when I first started. Of course, that's been a long time ago. That was pretty much our only test. We did a little bit of oral fluid, but our main source of testing was urine. And then I piloted the rapid hair test, the SAFElife rapid hair test, starting back in 2019. So I've actually been a part of hair testing for 5.5 years now.
And one of the challenges, of course, with urine testing has always been drug test cheating.
Absolutely.
There's lots of opportunities, and you must have experienced just everything from A to Z when it came to people trying to cheat on a urine drug test.
Yes, what I actually saw the most of, and this fairly recently too, is replacing their urine with someone else's urine or fake urine, or that was actually a big one. And people got creative in how to keep the temperature up and how to mask that. Fairly recently, we had they used the hot hands to try to keep the temperature, tape that to themselves. Of course, heat up the urine before they come in. So that was actually a big one that I found in probably the past year.
So, and sometimes you hear about these crazy things that people do to try to subvert a drug testing. You wonder if it wouldn't be just easier to stop using drugs, but I guess they'll try anything, right? But more recently, like you said, since 2019, you've been very involved with hair testing. How does hair testing make it more difficult for people to cheat on a drug test?
It okay, so in my experience with hair testing, I did see people try to cheat it, beat it, however you want to phrase it, as far as with bleach, with dye. I actually had one, I didn't know what he did at the time. He admitted later, pouring gasoline on himself to try to, on his head to try to mask it. And through the course of actually piloting the SAFElife hair test, I did keep detailed notes on anything that was abnormal with the hair. And sometimes that was just my observation. Sometimes that was actually discussing it with the client and they would admit to it, what they actually did. And none of those things worked in my experience. Everything that they try to do, the rapid would be positive and it was lab confirmed positive. So yes, I've seen some crazy things.
So let's back up a second because you bring up a good point, right? So with the Wondfo rapid hair test and processor, you're talking about a rapid result, right? Like rapid urine, rapid oral fluid. This is an instant result type of test, correct?
Exactly. So the test time read is 5 minutes, so very similar, obviously, to urine test. Um, and the process is a very short process that takes a minimum amount of hair. So you do that. It's in the processor for roughly 2 minutes. Then you pour the vial into the actual test, and your read time on that is your 5 minutes. So similar to a lot of other drug tests. And the thing about that is you're able to have that discussion with that person. We're talking obviously in my experience with probation. Um, have a discussion about that instead of waiting your week to possibly up to 2 weeks for to send the hair test off to the lab. And then by then, you've lost that discussion that you could have had. So ultimately, what ends up happening a lot of times in that situation, obviously when they're positive, is that you get an admission out of them.
So they're just going to confess on the spot.
Yes, I would say at least 75% of the time, in my experience. And also depends on your discussion, your experience, and in the open conversation that you can have, you do get an admission out of somebody.
Now, is the hair test, you know, for the donor, for the person that you're testing? I mean, what's their experience like? Is it a very sort of non-invasive type of experience? Are they sitting there waiting for the result along with you?
Yes, and so what happens is you do the collection walk. Typically, I would explain the process to them very briefly. Explain to them that it's not as if some have had a lab-based hair test before. Explain to them it's not as much hair. Try to ease their mind with that, um, and then obviously do the collection in the processor, and then you can sit there and have a discussion about a lot of things with the person, but ultimately, typically, obviously, the conversation goes to the drug use, and then a lot of times they even start talking before the results are even read and up,
Huh.
because for lack of a better word, it probably puts them in the hot seat a little bit, and they end up having a more open conversation about it.
So with the hair test, typically, and tell me if this is still correct with the rapid test, it's a much wider window of detection compared to urine testing. Is that still true with rapid testing?
Absolutely. So you have that time frame to where it takes a drug to get into the hair. Roughly 10 days is an estimate on that, and then it goes back your 90 days. So in a rapid test, within by collection time, waiting the full 5 minutes, in less than 10 minutes, you get a 90-day detection window.
Wow. So in your line of work prior to your position with Wondfo, these individuals would be under some obligation prohibited from using drugs at all, I would suppose.
Absolutely. So, of course, I'm talking in Texas, but I would assume that most states are very similar. There's what we call conditions of probation that they have to follow, and condition as far like condition two would be the drug use. I mean that it's a high priority, of course, is to abstain from any kind of drug or alcohol use. Some states vary on the alcohol part of that, but anywhere would be the drug use. So.
So that wider window of detection is not a problem in this arena. I mean, sometimes in the workplace, there's some concern about, say, somebody who uses marijuana in a state where marijuana use is legal, having that 90-day window of detection, how it doesn't really correlate to maybe impairment in the workplace. But in your previous profession, that wouldn't have been a concern.
No, and I would say even if when someone was placed on supervision at that intake appointment, if you even wanted to use the hair test as an assessment to get an idea of what's been going on with them, especially obviously if they were on for a drug charge or had a drug use history that you knew about, you might not could use that against them, say as a violation, what we consider in Texas, but it would give you something to go off of, and then you would know how to test someone after that. Um, But definitely, if they've been on supervision for 90 days or more, you have your whole range of that. You can be pretty certain that that use occurred while they were on supervision.
So ideal in this market, but I will mention the fact that many employers rely on hair tests, and in fact, in some DOT mandated drug testing scenarios, like with trucking companies, large trucking
Mhm.
companies, they'll use a hair test as sort of a pre-DOT urine test. So they're getting that wider window of detection for this truck driver that they're thinking about hiring before they conduct the urine mandated and at some point oral fluid mandated drug test. But that gives them a wider window of detection for somebody that they're about to hire into a very safety sensitive occupation. I would think that would be an advantage to be able to get the result right away.
100% I would agree because that 90-day window gives you an idea of lifestyle, for lack of a better word, and what's been going on with the person because a 90-day window of detection is a much better picture of that versus urine, which urine does serve its purpose in every aspect. But depending on that drug, it gives you 2 to 3 days possibly detection window. But to be able to go back 90 days, you do get a better understanding of what really is going on with an individual.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people in the drug testing industry, but in the various markets that we serve, they probably never imagined the possibility of a rapid hair test. I mean, we've got rapid urine, we've got rapid oral fluid, but a rapid hair test, I think, is sort of, next generation type of technology. What's the reception been so far to the idea of a rapid hair test?
Um, well, in my previous industry, I think people were like amazed at, oh, this technology is great as far as employees. But then you have the other side of that when you're dealing with clients that are not used to this. It was kind of a shock to them. It was like, oh, I've been caught. You had a little bit of that mentality. So, but I think once they had an understanding of it, they got used to it. And through that, actually, through implementing the hair test within a department, I kind of had an eye opening experience to how clients were cheating your other drug tests.
Hmm.
And so it gave you a sense of maybe how to change some things all over to do. Um, so it was eye opening in a lot of ways, and all for the good. Um, and ultimately, sometimes with that, it revealed a bigger problem. You would have someone that had negative urine tests for years, months,
Hmm.
and hair tests, and they were positive, and then you could have that conversation about what's really going on with the person.
Now, do you think it was because they sort of knew how to game the system when it came to traditional urine testing? Or was it the shorter window of detection versus the longer window of detection with hair? Because it just seems like with hair testing, that 90-day window of detection, it's pretty hard to abstain from drug use long enough to pass that test, especially if you don't know when you're going to have the test.
Exactly. I would say my course of it, most of the time, what I got from it were people were using frequently, but they were able to stop a couple of days before they reported and submit a clean test. That's a lot of the times what I got. And then also, um, I do feel like in some sense, I've heard stories and they would finally admit flushing their system, a lot of things that they would do. But I think ultimately people learned how to time it was a big thing that I figured out.
Yeah. And now in the workplace market, not always, of course, but employers are looking for drug testing devices or methods that have been either cleared by the Food and Drug Administration, FDA clearance, or that has what sort of this newer phenomena of what's referred to as E&I labeling or employment and insurance labeling. And my understanding is that you're sort of you're making your way toward that with the hair processor.
Exactly. So the SAFElife Hair Processor and Hair Test did get that classification last month.
Yeah.
So please reach out to us more information on that. But I'm excited to get into that market and learn more about that and do great things in that area as well.
Yeah, I just wrote an article on what E&I labeling is and the value of that, and we'll put the link to that here in the podcast so people can go back and look at that. But that's a big deal to get that labeling because it gives the buyer an extra level of assurance and confidence in the product that they're using. It's not just from some other country and here it is and we don't know what it
Right.
is or how it's used or anything like that. That E&I labeling is a legitimate sort of confidence builder in the technology. So I applaud you for that. What's sort of on the horizon, Jessica? I mean, what advice would you have for potential buyers that like hair testing and are sort of, this is like the first they've heard of rapid hair testing?
Well, one, reach out to us, please, at Wondfo USA to get more information. But um, it's it's the only thing that's on the market like this, and to be able to get a 90-day detection window out of a product and not have to wait a week or two to get the results from a lab is there's nothing out there like it. So whether you're using it on the forensic side or the employment side, there's nothing else like it to get that detection time.
What's interesting also about this, because over the course of my 30 plus years in the drug testing business, I've seen a lot of technologies come and go, and people claim that this is going to be the next big thing. And then the technology actually either doesn't work or they never actually come out with a product. What's great about this is Wondfo USA, obviously a very legitimate company with other products on the market, but this product exists. It's actually on the market. It's available now. It does work. I mean, you've been using it for over 5 years now, it sounds like.
Yes, I have almost 5.5 years. And one thing I'll say is I, feel like I'm vested in the product enough by using it that I I switched career paths in order to promote the product because it's a good product. I've seen how it has 100% changed lives, individual lives. It's changed how, in my experience, a department can supervise people more effectively, get them the help that they need, the treatment. I have seen so many cases, and I could tell you stories for days over how the hair test revealed such a problem that the other drug test was missing. Not that they're bad, wrong, whatever, but it's I've truly seen how it has changed lives.
All right. So, Jessica, thank you so much for that great information and for the interesting experiences that you've had during your career and your willingness to share all of that. If our audience wants to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
So for more product information, definitely visit wonfousa.com. And then also we can link my email, jessica.g@wonfousa.com.
Thank you. And also contact me, be current at currentconsultinggroup.com, and I can put you in touch with Jessica as well. Jessica, thank you for joining us for this episode of Currently Speaking. To our audience, thank you for joining us. You can find this episode and all past episodes of Currently Speaking on all the major podcast platforms, as well as on our website. So go to currentconsultinggroup.com. You'll find a podcast page, and there you'll find past episodes, including the one that Jessica and I did back in August, if you'd like to learn a little bit more from her experience at that time. Again, thank you for joining us. This concludes another episode of Currently Speaking. Have a great day.